Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Mead. I'm on the Angels Camp Museum Foundation, one of their directors. Also here is Nate, he's a director, and Chloe back there is a director. So we're happy to introduce Glen White to you and talk about Calaveras geology. I've known this guy, I was thinking about it since late 80s? Mid 80s. We were both baby geologists on our first job. It was pretty humorous. And he's done very well. He's taught numerous colleges and numerous college classes, and he's at Columbia College right now. He wrote his master's thesis on the Mono craters over on the east side on 395 by Mono Lake, and the effect of an eruption there, what it would do to our water system, Hetch Hetchy, and how it would affect California side. So he's pretty familiar with the whole thing. So anyway, I'd like to introduce Glen White.
Thank you, everyone. So my purpose here today is to help us kind of tell a story. And so geology is about learning to read the story in the rocks, and I've got some rocks. I'll be passing those around as we get to those different parts in the story. And I'm going to start off with my favorite rock. This is my favorite rock I've ever found, and people are surprised it's just a river rock. But as it comes around, take a look at it. There's a lot of information we can read out of this rock. There's a lot of story here, and this rock's story goes back about 400 million years. And so this story is a piece of what we're going to talk about today. Even though this did not come from Calaveras or Tuolumne County, this was actually found down near Snelling in some of the dredger tailings. But that's part of the gold story we'll cover today. So as this comes around, just take a look at it. There is at least one real interesting feature is why it's my favorite rock. So we can talk about that at the end when it comes around. So our story of geology involves time. And one of the things I like to do is try to get people to think about what we call deep time. And so Earth's story goes back about 4.6 billion years. And lately we hear that number, usually in terms of dollars. But what is a billion? So I'm going to ask you to make a movie of your life. And on the day you were born is the first second. Every second of your movie is the next birthday. So think about how long your movie takes to run. How long would Earth's movie run at that same scale? Now it gets 4.5 billion seconds. What would that be? Well, if we compare our movie to the Earth's movie, it turns out the Earth's movie would go about 142 and a half years. Calaveras and our part of California's geology, that movie only goes about 12 and a half years. So we're going to go back about 400 million years. And again, that's roughly the age of that rock. So California geology is very complex. And we're going to do the very simplified version of it to try to boil it down to some of the big events. And all of this explanation comes around because we have an understanding of plate tectonics, where the crust of the Earth is broken into giant slabs. About a dozen, maybe 20 major slabs, and they're moving around on the surface of the Earth because of the heat inside the Earth. And to give you a sense of scale, if we could shrink the Earth down to a basketball, the crust of the Earth would be about 10 sheets of paper thick. So we've got this thin little layer on the outside with all this heat inside, and it's able to tear continents apart, shove them together, raise up mountains, and give us a very complex geology here in California. So we've got these pretty neat lineations or stripes of rocks, and kind of an analogy to think about, it's like pushing a throw rug across a wooden floor and you hit a wall, and it would start to rumple. And these are rumpled seafloor sediments. The pink are the granitic rocks of the Sierra Nevada. They actually formed 3 to 6 miles below the surface, but through processes that have been lifted up to the surface and exposed through erosion. And the erosion of that stuff ended up down here in the Central Valley, filling that up. And that process continues. This process of crunching, that one has ended, but the process of uplifting still continues. So if we could slice through the edge of the Earth, and this is, again, 400 million years ago, our starting point is there was one of the plates, we call it the Farallon plate. And it was moving away from the Pacific plate, which still exists, and this is a spreading zone where new ocean floor is forming. That's happening in the middle of the Atlantic to this day. We are moving further from Europe and Africa about the rate that your fingernails grow, so 2 to 4 inches per year. The Atlantic is still growing. This spreading center, this is tapped down to material down in the mantle, the next big layer inside the Earth, so it stays put, but the North American plate, we are moving westward. As we do, we collide with this Farallon plate. This is thinner and denser material, so we run over it. It's a process called subduction. And as that's pushed down, we keep moving west, and eventually we ran over that spreading center. There's more to that story. So as this oceanic crust is moving and subducting, seafloor sediments, were things that have eroded off the land out onto the ocean and deposited, those things are now getting added. It's kind of like scraping peanut butter off of your knife onto some bread. It's a process called accretion. So we're adding to the edge of North America, and North America has grown westward from about Utah to where it is now through this process of accretion, plastering stuff on to the edge of the continent. When it does that, it's adding heat and pressure. So when we start with the sediments on the ocean floor, it's mud. That would have collected and compressed, and the mud became a sedimentary rock called shale. With heat and pressure, that sedimentary rock was metamorphosed and baked and turned into slate, and then what we have around here is what's called phyllite. And so most people around here will refer to it as slate, but it is different than slate. It's been metamorphosed a little bit more. Slate has nice flat cleavage planes. In fact, we call it slaty cleavage. And that's what we made blackboards out of and pool tables. This has gone a little bit further, and so now it's a little bit more wavy surface. And if you move it around in the light, you'll see it's got a little sheen to it. Slate has a more dull color. So I'll let this come around. So that was seafloor mud. It got scraped off the edge of the continent, plastered onto the edge, and metamorphosed to form the phyllite. You may find this around here with little cubes of pyrite in it, or sometimes the pyrite's gone. Pyrite weathers out pretty easily, and you'll see a little hole that the pyrite used to be in. And that's, again, more indication that we've gone beyond slate and we're to phyllite. There are also a few little islands out here, and these may have actually been volcanic islands, and some of them may have been seamounts, underwater mountains. And as these were erupting, they were tapped into this magma down below. As they're erupting, some of that lava erupted down into the ocean, and it's a basaltic lava. And we'll see some pictures of this in a little bit. But this is that basaltic lava, but it also has been metamorphosed, and this formed what we call greenstone. And that's an easy name to remember. It's just kind of a greenish color. And if you erupt lava underwater, it'll make a blob that'll chill on the outside, and then that blob will burst, and another blob will form, and it forms pillow lava. It's a really cool structure, and there are places in, I haven't seen it in Calaveras County, but I know in Tuolumne, where you can see that relic structure. It's been preserved in the rocks. So that was lava, and now it's called greenstone. Around these islands, in the shallow water areas, that's where marine organisms would live. And 400 million years ago, we didn't have coral, but we had proto-coral. And they would have been building their coral reefs, seashells, out of the calcium carbonate in the seawater. And then as that got plastered on the edge, our limestone, it was metamorphosed into marble. So when this comes around, you'll notice it's got kind of a sugary grain sparkle to it. Again, that tells us that this was metamorphosed. So the phyllite, the greenstone, and the now marble all are indicative of seafloor or marine sediments. So they formed in the ocean, but here we are 2,000 feet above sea level. Something happened, and that was this accretion and metamorphism that took place. So the plate that's subducted, this is the Farallon, this is the North American, we're moving west. As we run over it, it's taking some sediments down with it, but also some seawater. That the rock is cracked, seawater would go down in there, and that changed the melting point. And that would lead to some magma generation that would move up. This, if it cools underground, is going to be the granite that we see at the surface today. But 100 million years ago, it was molten rock deep underground. And this accretionary wedge, it's got a bunch of fractures in it. As this magma is moving upward, it's cooling, it's losing heat. And there's a sequence that granitic rocks or magmas form. The minerals form out in a particular sequence. It's called the Bowen's reaction series. But in general, the dark minerals, the iron and magnesium-rich minerals, cool first. And as they come out of the magma and form their crystals, the magma's chemistry changes. And towards the end, what you're left with is hydrothermal fluids, mostly water, some gold, and silica. And silica is the building block for quartz. So this is a low temperature mineral, and when students bring me samples of quartz and say, is this igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary? It depends. So quartz can form in all three types. If it cools out of a magma in granite, and some of these little gray specks are quartz crystals, then it's igneous. If, and we have some of these on the way 49 between here and Maloney's, you'll see some little quartz seams. Those are metamorphic. They've been squeezed out of the rock and recrystallized. And some of them, if they came in as a hydrothermal fluid and precipitated out, then it's sedimentary. If you see quartz crystals, the nice clear hexagonals, those are sedimentary. They formed out of a solution. So as this heated material is rising through the pre-existing rock, the fluids that carry a little bit of gold and a little bit of silica in solution are moving up paths of least resistance, so fault lines. And eventually, they get to some environment. The pressure, the temperature, the geochemistry is right, it precipitates out, and gold starts to deposit. Okay, so out here, this material has gold in it. There's gold in seawater, there's gold out in this dirt. It's just not concentrated. So this plate tectonic and volcanism allowed that to concentrate to put it into a zone where now it's economic. We can go and get it. So we keep moving west. These are 4 separate time slices. Here's the Pacific Plate and the Farallon. We're moving westward. We ran over that spreading center. That changed a couple of conditions. We're no longer scraping stuff off the seafloor, but that spreading zone is now hot stuff underneath us, and that starts a period of volcanism in our Sierra. If you have high silica magma, which is that quartz or granite, so quartz is pure silica, granite has high silica, it's maybe 75% silica, it changes the viscosity. And viscosity, so if I have something that's really viscous, it's sticky and like cold honey. Water, low viscosity. If I have high silica, it makes magma sticky, and I end up with explosive volcanism. So about 20 million years ago, we went through this series of explosive volcanic activity that was taking place from like the crest of the Sierra and eastward. And it blanketed this area under, in some places, hundreds of feet of volcanic ash. In our Stanislaus River, it filled the river valley up. The water cycle doesn't stop. Rain keeps falling, snow keeps falling. The water had to find a place to go. It carved a new channel. And so in parts of Calaveras, around Big Trees and Parrots Ferry, over into Tuolumne County from Columbia all the way down to Knights Ferry, you see Table Mountain. Table Mountain is what we call inverted topography. It's a river channel that's now high. And there's several places around here when we talk about the gold, the Central Hill Channel. That is another stream bed that has filled in and is now higher than where the rivers are. How did they get there? Well, you fill them in, you lift the land up, and the water finds another way to go, carves out through softer stuff in order to head on downhill, making new channels. So this area was covered with rhyolitic ash. And out on Camp 9 Road, there's a couple of places where you can still see it. It's kind of a light cream colored rock, very fine grain. And if you look at it under magnifying lens or microscope, you actually see little shards of glass. The glass are silica, and it indicates this explosive volcanism. After we go through this period, about 10 million years ago, we go through effusive volcanism, which is lower silica. This flows down some of these river channels, capping them, and this rock is more basaltic. And we've got a piece of Table Mountain here, and this is actually called latite. It's close to basalt. And if you turn it around, you notice there's a little hole in here. That's a gas bubble that crystals have started to form in it. This is how you make geodes or agates, is you fill up the bubbles that are in the rock. This was extremely fluid lava. It started on the other side of Sonora Pass, if you know where the Mountain Warfare Training Center is. It started there. Now, 10 million years ago, that side of the Sierra weren't as low and the Sierra weren't as high, so it was a little closer. But it was runny enough to flow from the crest of the Sierra Nevada to Knights Ferry, over 60 miles. And it did it 4 times. So that capped the river channel, this new river channel. And then we've got ongoing erosion. It attacks the softer volcanic ash easier than the harder lava, erodes away that stuff and leaves this lava cap now sitting high and dry. And the miners recognized it as a river channel, and they knew, let's go get the gold in the river channel. That's where gold is. So now we're only up to 10 million years. And when we think about the age of some of these rocks, 400 million years old, Table Mountain is one of the last things. I mean, it's pretty young, certainly geologically speaking. Now, we all know that ice floats, and about 9% of it will float above the water. And if I could cut that ice off right there, the rest of this would bob up in response to the loss. 9% of that new mass will be above the water. The same thing's happening out here in the crust of the earth. As water is wearing things down and carrying it away, down to what'll be the Central Valley, these rocks are less dense than the stuff below them, so they bob up, and we call that isostasy. So when we talk about the Sierra Nevada granites being formed 3 to 6 miles deep, there's a misconception that the Sierra Nevada were 3 to 6 miles tall. They weren't ever that tall. They might have been a little higher than they are now, but they were certainly a lot lower most of the time. But there's enough of a gradient for water to just keep slowly breaking the stuff down and carrying it away, and that granitic rock bobs up in response. The Sierra Nevada are still rising. Now, we don't experience that, but every now and then there's going to be an earthquake, and the Sierra Nevada will rise a few inches, a few feet, and then do nothing for a few centuries. But it's ongoing, it's still happening. And that's response to that loss of material, and it gives us what has been likened to sort of a trap door that we are tilting up, and what wears off is filling up our Central Valley. Down near Brentwood, there's been some oil and gas exploration, and they have mapped the sediments there at 9 miles thick. So that's, where did all our stuff go? It's down there. I know a guy who's standing in the back. He used to farm on Half Dome, the other half. So that stuff that's wearing off, filling up down here, and this is bobbing up in response. East of that, we've got the Mono Basin, we've got the Basin and Range Province that goes all the way out to Utah. The surface area of Nevada has essentially doubled in maybe the last 15 to 20 million years. So it's getting, its crustal extension, it's getting thinner. Then, 3 million years ago, lasting to about 15,000 years ago, so this means mega-annum and kilo-annum, we've got glaciation. Another misconception, and it's one thing I cringe at, they talk about glaciers being nature's bulldozers. Bulldozers push and plow. Glaciers flow. These are very viscous material, and it'll flow and undulate with the landscape. But they're really good conveyor belts. Anything that falls on them gets carried away. And every piece of rock that it picks up on the bottom, it drags along and grinds along through the base. So Yosemite Valley wasn't bulldozed out. It was sanded and scoured. So this process has further shaped our landscape, and then we have ongoing weathering and erosion. Water is known as the universal solvent. It breaks everything down. It just takes a long time to do it. There's fractures in the rock. Water, ice are going to work on that. Even trees are going to get in the act and start wedging and prying things apart. So these rocks that formed deep inside the earth are now exposed at surface temperatures. They're out of equilibrium. They're not happy out here. And so these processes are slowly going to be breaking them down, weathering them away, and carrying it off down under the influence of gravity to be deposited somewhere else. So we're going to take a little tour up Highway 4, traveling east, point out a few of the rock outcrops that you'll see, and get a few more specimens to pass around. So as we go up the hill, you're not necessarily going from the youngest to the oldest or oldest to the youngest. They're just however they are, because we've got this jumbled mess of stuff. And by all means, whenever you get a chance, get out, go check them out. You know, some of these will be in big trees, and a lot of places to go hike and go touch the rocks. Yeah, it's the best way to experience them. So a topographic map. This is this Bear Mountain there, and here's Angels, and we've got this kind of trough. Again, this is that rumpling of these mountains, and our gold district running right up through here along one of the sets of folds in this metamorphic belt. And then we can also see the roll of water carving down through this. So down just north of Copperopolis, you may see these tombstone rocks. And so these are more resistant to weathering. These weren't shoved out of the ground. This stuff eroded away, exposed them. And this is the greenstone that came around. So these are mostly metamorphosed lava flows. If you drive down Highway 108, you get down by the Keystone Ranch area where the double lanes are. You go through some flats, and then there's some hills they've cut through. Those hills are greenstone. It's more resistant, and that's why those ridges are there. Everything in between is eroded out. So these didn't squeeze up. They've just been exposed through this weathering, and they're covered in lichen, so you're not really getting the true color of the rock. You need to see it broken open to see the true color of them. This is Table Mountain looking near Jamestown. There's the Jamestown mine. We've got a nugget of gold that I'm going to show you in a little bit that runs through here. But there's the meandering river that was in volcanic ash, and then the lava came down in that new channel. The ash eroded away, leaving that inverted topography. If you come over Parrott's Ferry, so here's Maloney's Parrott's Ferry Road, there is a little bit of Table Mountain on this side. And there is a trail that goes up to the top, and there's it's like a drop sonde that the Navy has practiced. They'll hook up and play with it with their helicopters. But that is a little bit of where the Stanislaus got moved for a period of time in order to form a channel, fill in, and now all the soft stuff is eroded away, and it's back into its older channel. If we get up to Camp 9, there's the Cataract Quarry. This is abandoned now, but this is it was a limestone or carbonate quarry. There's limestone, then dolomite and marble. And this is the basic ingredient in cement. You take calcium carbonate, calcite, grind it up, roast it, you drive off carbon dioxide, you get lime. And you add some other ingredients, and you end up making cement out of it. So this was a major quarry. On the other side of the river, you can see the quarry, the Blue Mountain Mineral Quarry that's active to this day. So the chunk that came around, the white crystalline one, came from here. You may see some horizontal beds. This is near Douglas Flat. And these are a mixture of volcanic mudflow deposits. There's some ash deposits. And there may be a little bit of that lava. I haven't seen any, but most of this is volcanic mudflow and ash deposits. I forgot to bring my chunk of mudflow. I've got a piece, we call this lahar, and it actually looks kind of like dirty concrete. It's chunks of different stuff with kind of a brown mud, but good and hard stuff. This is in Big Trees. This is a close-up of the lahar. So sometimes you had a very active flow, big chunks of stuff. Sometimes it's more fine-grained. There are some places in there that looks like it might be airfall. So this would be ash that fell out of the sky. Some of it was carried by water and deposited and did some sorting. And so we've got a bunch of sequences there. This is also in Big Trees, and now we've cut down into the granitic rocks, and we got a whole different style of rocks. So we've got 100-million-year-old granitic rocks capped by these 10 and 20-million-year-old volcanics. And this is the active process of erosion. The water doesn't do that. The water uses rocks and swirls them around to do it. In some of our granitic rocks, you may see these. So this was molten rock. This was a chunk of pre-existing rock. Some of that metamorphic rock on top, we call that the country rock. The magma came up underneath, and a chunk of that broke off, sank down in, and got cooked and recrystallized, and we call these xenoliths, means foreign rock. And so if you see a chunk like that, then it tells you this was something up above that sank down in. Sometimes, if this magma was really hot, you may even see kind of a little plume that shows as this was sinking, it was kind of dripping off of that. Now, this isn't Calaveras County anymore. We've crossed over the pass, but on the far side, this is Silver Mountain. And so for a long time, the question was, where did all the volcanics come from? We know over in the Sonora Pass where that it was. And so there's a former instructor, Kathy Busby from UC Santa Barbara. Her students were mapping from 108 to Highway 4. And a student said, well, what's this? And she said, we don't want to mess with it. It's too complex. Finally, a student convinced her to look at it. And they said, that's probably one of the volcanoes. So this is a whole series of volcanic materials. So the source area might have been right here. It's not that this is the volcano. It's probably on the flanks of it. And this may be some of the material that came down that we're now seeing around Douglas Flat area. Part of the glaciation, again, this is on the far side of the pass. Looking down, if you kept on going, you'd get to Markleyville. But that classic U-shaped valley is there, telling us a glacier once occupied this. This is an area that Silver Mountain, there's is it Kronsberg? There was a little town down here that was a major silver mining operation. When they struck gold at Virginia City, it got abandoned. They went after that. But that's part of that mineralization process where the hot material mobilized it. In that case, it was emplacing silver instead of gold. When you see this, you know glaciers have been around. Glaciers don't sort their material, they just dump it. So this is called glacial moraine, big stuff, little stuff, everything in between, sometimes rounded, sometimes more angular. But this is, there are a lot of road cuts that go through this, and we can tell, okay, glacier at least made it this far. And then some of these chunks of rock that were in the glacial ice, when the ice melts, it sets them down. We call these glacial erratics. These are just strands left behind, and there's places in Yosemite, they're up on the top of domes. And so the only way they could gotten there is if glacial ice carried them. And in order to make a glacier, you have to have at least 100 feet of snow. And then the glacial ice starts to form. So when you see these things perched, you have to go up in the air, maybe several hundred feet to figure out where the top of the snow used to be. And then we have ongoing carving. This is the Stanislaus River from the Cataract Quarry where the limestone is. Seeing Maloney's. Maloney's is named after the seeds or gold nuggets that look like melon seeds. And so the Stanislaus is carved through and mobilized things, and this process of erosion continues. This was January of '97. This is Highway 4, Dorrington is up here, and this is the slide that came down and it took out the bridge at Board's Crossing. So it's ongoing. Well, the reason we are here in the foothills has to do with our mining, and you may recognize a couple of those. They're right outside. So the first mining technique was called placer. Placer is Mother Nature's done the work. She broke the rocks down, and gold being more dense, settled out. Give you a sense of its density. This is a cube of tungsten. And so this has a density very similar to gold. Now, if this were gold, this would be worth about $80,000. But as this comes around, it gives you a sense of the density of gold. Yeah, it's a little over 2 pounds. So the first miners came in and they got the easy gold. They could go into and just pan it. The rocks were broken down, the gold was just stranded. And then they'd use pans, they'd use sluices, and then they started using the hydraulic monitors in order to wash things down to kind of enhance what Mother Nature's process was of getting that gold broken out of the rocks and settling in the low spots. Then they discovered that there were some of these channels that had gold in it, but the channels had been filled up. And locally we have the Central Hill Channel, and this they call drift mining. So they're mining through these gravel deposits to find the gold out of there. And once they got out of that, then they had to go underground, the hard rock mining, and that's the lode gold, the ore. And just down the road at Carson Hill was the Morgan mine, and that's where the largest single mass of gold was ever found in California. 195-pound Troy mass of gold. So that Carson Hill mine, 15 miles of workings. There's other places like the Empire mine up in Grass Valley. It's over 1,000 miles. So we really want gold. This is the Angels Camp and some of the claims. And let's see, we've got the Utica kind of right across the street. And we're probably over here. Do you know the names, Dave? Are we the dead horse? With this?
This is a quartz mine.
The Foster Quartz Mine?
Could be, yeah. I don't have quartz, the name.
Okay.
Those are all claims?
These were mining claims, yeah. So they would stake out a claim and they could go down. In our region, so Angels and Carson Hill were really hot spots for where gold had deposited. In the entire Motherlode region, 13,000 gold mines throughout, 4,000 tons of gold taken out, over 128 million ounces, and at today's value, close to 3,000, it's about $385 billion came out. Is there gold still on the ground? Certainly. Do we know how much? No. The Carson Hill, that mass, that 195 troy pounds would be $6.5 million. One chunk of gold. I don't know if I could lift 195, but if it was gold, I probably could. So here's an old woodcut in Carson Hill, and the Morgan mine, they came in from the Stanislaus River. There's the old Highway 49 bridge. There was a railroad that came through there, and this was a substantial operation. They went into the mine, and then they worked their way upward. And here's what it looks like now. So it became open pit. They had a sand and gravel operation there, but they were recovering some gold. There was several stories about people that got sand or gravel for their driveways and then realized there's gold in my driveway. They were out metal detecting. Up over on the side, there's a mass there that's covered. It's tarped. And actually, I had a friend that worked on that. That's gold ore that they processed the wrong way. And so it's been classified as mine waste. It'll probably never be actually processed until somebody finds a good technology to do it. But yeah, they got a lot of gold out of this. And using the large scale equipment, it's easier just to move the entire mountain than to work your little tunnels. So this is the crown jewel over in Ironstone, 44 troy pounds. They bought it for, actually, at that, if you were to melt it down, 1.5 million. If you melt it down, you've lost most of its value. Its value is in its specimen. This is the largest piece of crystalline leaf gold on the planet. There's probably were other pieces found someplace, and most of our really cool nuggets all got melted down. They weren't into specimen. So head up to Murphy's to Ironstone and check this out. It's very shiny, and that's because it has about 5 to 10% silver content. Gold nuggets, when you pan it, they come out a little brassier color. It doesn't seem as pretty. It's because it's lost the silver that was in it. So pure gold is a little brassier yellow than the gold that still has silver content in it. So I wanted to come up with some diagrams for you, and I thought, well, I'll see if AI can come up with something. So I typed in prompts and I was getting garbage, so I asked a different AI program, can you write me a prompt? And that's the prompt, as detailed as it would come up with, can you show me how California formed through plate tectonics and everything? And it said, sure. And so I took this and I pasted it into the image generator, and it gave me that.
Oh my goodness.
And that is garbage. Gabahoo, oceanic cruft. There's arrows going up and down in all different ways. And so I use this with my students to show them that AI is not intelligent. It's trying to figure some things out, but that's what it's coming up with. I've got a couple more specimens that I wanted to pass around. And so everybody knows our state mineral, right? Our state mineral? Gold. This is our state rock. This is serpentine or serpentinite. It gets its name because it's got kind of a serpent scale feel to it. And so this is found in a lot of places along Highway 49. The Motherlode fault zone has taken some of these deep rocks, added a little water, and then scrunched them, and it makes serpentine.
And is this asbestos?
No, asbestos would be a little white fiber, and I definitely wouldn't pass it around. And some places we find this real pretty green rock. And this is called mariposite, named after Mariposa County, which is named after butterflies. So this is a chromium containing mineral that gives it that green color. And the miners would look at this not as gold containing, but a mineralized zone that could indicate gold was close by. So in some of this, you may see a little flecks of iron pyrite glittering in here. And this, as far as I know, it's found here along the Motherlode and in Australia, and there might be a couple places, European places. But it's a nice hard rock, very good for decorative stuff. But most of the pieces I got, I worked with a guy that he bought a house and somebody made a waterfall out of it. And it had a little pond, and he was going to break that down and fill the pond with the mariposite. I said, I'll take it. So I hauled several hundred pounds away, but it polishes up really nice. It's a beautiful rock. Not a gold indicator, but an indication that there's minerals. It has been mineralized. Maybe there's be some gold there. All right. So is that the end of the story? No, it's a work in progress. The active processes are lifting the plates up, wearing them off. We're making new discoveries, better explanations. So we're not done. Questions?